Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this edition of the Presence Posse. Today, joining me is Dr. Fred Blum, and we are going to be exploring the middle session of our winter trilogy. Today, we're talking about presence and receiving. And normally, in this role of being the MC, is Miriam Siegel. She's a little under the weather today, so she's running tech for us. We appreciate you soldiering through, Miriam. And Fred, Miriam had a comment in our little chat saying that she was very curious about how two men
I saw that.
were going to handle the subject of presence and receiving. And I guess that is kind of, if you're into the yin yang philosophy, receiving is very yin, which
Hmm.
is typically considered more of a feminine trait. So we'll see how we stumble through it today and what comes up for us. So, what are some initial thoughts that you have around presence and receiving, friend?
Well, I mean, just, as I try and receive what I'm about to say from whatever, source that stuff comes from, I think that receiving is actually something that the word receive has actually been very, it's been showing up for me lately.
Hmm.
And so again, in no particular order of importance, one of the things that receiving seems to represent to me currently is about getting out of the way. There's something that I'm beginning to explore in my own life, and in fact, I was just on a call with a client right before this, where I'm beginning to get a sense of something like the universe really is endlessly abundant. And somehow that I believe, or I'm beginning to get a sense that there is a mechanism that somehow is tied to the fulfillment of desire. And I call that creation, that we're, as human beings, we are creators. So if that's true, then receiving has to be an integral part of that.
Mm.
That somehow we have to be able to open, to get out of the way, whatever it is, so that we can receive what it is. Because I think that's actually an issue. I think that many people have this idea: I want this, I want this, I want this, but they don't really change whatever needs to open in here so that they can actually receive that. And as we go on, we can talk more about, like, I have this idea that the whole system is almost set up to fulfill our desires, but you have to understand a little bit about the mechanisms, and that's something that I'm kind of learning about right now in my own life.
Yeah, it's almost like when I think of receiving, I kind of pair it with resistance. And I, as I've been doing my own peeling back of my own intimacy onion to get more and more in touch with my true nature, I've noticed a lot more things where I'm resisting the unfolding of life,
Mhm.
which is that's an internal psychological block that I feel like I'm throwing up to receiving what the universe is having to give to me or wants to give to me or that is just showing up. And to me it's a big conditioning issue because if you think about, we are very conditioned to not receive, we are conditioned to create, and but it's creating more from an egoic
Mhm.
mind body standpoint. And I mean, if you think about some of the axioms that are so common in our parlance, suck it up, power through, the obstacle is the way, fake it until you make it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get back up again. There is a just a conditioned belief that we need to be doing something to make something happen. And so, this idea, as you're framing it, can we open up enough to be able to receive? It almost, from the standpoint of conditioning, feels a little counterintuitive to
Mm-hmm.
me. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I get it. Yeah, I think a lot of those phrases, fake, fake it till you make it, and all of that stuff. I think I'm not saying they're wrong, by the way. I'm not here to like set up some kind of polarity. Uh, I do think they're very tied to control. So different people are in different stages of evolution. There's nothing wrong with whatever stage of evolution any of us are in. Uh, and I'm even going to say, and this may be hard to appreciate, but it's not better to be in some later stage of evolution than an earlier stage. It's
Hmm.
whatever stage of evolution we're in, that's where we're supposed to be. So there are certain stages of this process of our own growth where control is maybe really important. It's an aspect of that reality or whatever we call it. So at that level of the game, fake it till you make it, and whatever those other things you said, that makes sense. It's nothing wrong there. Um, and something like receiving. So fake it, all that stuff you said are very masculine, by the way.
Yeah, yeah, very
And
yang.
yeah, very young and all that kind of
Yeah.
thing. And so you might, from if you're deeply embedded in that particular frame of reference, receiving might seem, you know, like,
Foreign.
what was the word?
Foreign. I mean, it's
Foreign,
like
right?
unnatural.
Unnatural. You might ridicule it. It might seem woo woo, uh, or you might even find it vaguely uncomfortable, like somehow it threatens some aspect of who you think you are. To let go of like your white knuckle grip on the steering wheel for a second. But then at some other point, and this is me, right? This is my own process where that was what I thought I had to do for a long time, build and create. And by the way, I sucked at it. But that was still what I thought I had to do. Uh, and I kind of stumbled along in that paradigm for probably way longer than I needed to. And currently, and I'm talking relatively recently in the past several months, it's just becoming obvious to me that is just not the path for me anymore. I mean, I guess maybe it was, but and so now it really looks like I need to relax and be more in the realm of creation and receiving than in doing and making things happen. And you know, I'm not so attached. Like, I have ideas of what I want to create in the world, but I'm much less attached to what that creation has to look like,
Mm.
or how it takes form. It may come differently than I expected it to come. And at least in this short term, sometimes way better than I thought it might come. So,
Yeah, some of those happy accidents. I think anybody who's been on a long achievement journey can look back in the rearview mirror and see some things that, for a time, seem like it might be your life mission.
mm-hmm.
And then you got to a certain point in the road and it became obvious, oh, this part of the journey was just to get me to here so that I could see to take this new vehicle the new road that I was meant to be on.
Yeah. What's the phrase? Life can only be lived forward, but understood backwards.
Well, I haven't heard that one. I heard a Steve Jobs version of that it's very difficult to connect the dots looking forward. It's easy to connect the dots in
Same
the
thing.
rearview mirror. Yeah, same
Yeah.
same idea.
Yeah. But you
Uh,
don't want to live your life driving. Like, if you're driving down the road of life, you can't be driving looking through the rearview mirror. You
Right.
know, that's dangerous.
Yeah.
So it's some interesting balance there between, you check your rearview mirror from from time to time, but you really want to be looking out ahead.
Yeah. Well, and you touched on something with the whole receiving idea and the achievement of it. That when we slow down enough to get present, certain things happen. However, just honoring where you are in your journey and recognizing, well, I'm here right now. I was
Mhm.
witness to a conversation between two business partners, and one of the partners was kind of saying, I told you we should have done this. A lot of I told you so
Mhm.
kind of conversation going on. And finally, the other person just said, I get it. You were right. I was the one that led us here, but we're here now. So what do we do?
Mhm.
And, in a way, that's kind of receiving the awareness that in the present moment, here's where we stand. And in the present moment, maybe we realize that we are starting to question some of our conditioning and wondering if it's actually serving us anymore, and having this desire to get out and seeing you, for example, I'll just use you as an example, as somebody who really is living a very easy and seemingly graceful life, viewed from the outside, that wonderful things just seem to happen to. That's kind of my view of our conversations. And, there is a tendency to think, oh, I want to be more like Fred. I want to be just like Fred. I want to have what Fred has. And that now becomes resistance to where you are
Well,
in the
I mean,
moment.
I just funny, like the joke to me that came to my mind is like, says the man that lives like in this incredible place, like, no one's ever thought, God, I wish I could be like Bobby. I'm sure that,
Nah.
never, never. Uh, and I appreciate the thought nonetheless. It's, um, there, I'm just really, really leaning more and more into this idea that life can come to me, that I don't have to go out and get it and like, whip it into submission. Like, life will bend to my will. Again, very masculine. Uh, it's, I, I tried that. It just
Me
never
too.
really worked for me. Uh, I tried it because that's what I thought it was supposed to be. I
Yeah.
just, that was the model that, you said it before. We're all conditioned in that model, even women. It's like, um, not to, get overly political or whatever here, but I've noticed that there's, like in, I guess maybe it was the 70s or something, where feminism became a big thing. Um, and in that frame, uh, women, I think maybe for a time, try to sort of become like men. We can be business and we can succeed in this and that. And of course, there's nothing wrong. I'm not saying that was a bad idea. Um, but then I noticed recently that there seems to be a little bit of like pulling back from that. And, maybe the point isn't that maybe, the natural qualities of femininity offer a very different way of living in the world than the masculine does, and maybe it's finding a balance between those two where we can really create a great life or create a wonderful world.
Yeah. I've got a lot of female clients who, uh, people will say, man, she's got way more testosterone
Mm-hmm.
in her, way more drive in her. And it's in a way, I think when that's said, that's meant to be a compliment. I don't know that it's always received that way. And yeah, the feminist movement, it's like there was one ideal, a conditioned ideal of, the Doris Day kind of Leave It to Beaver sort of,
Hmm.
happy housewife type of thing. And then all of a sudden that was changed and a new ideal was created and something new that, quote unquote, working women needed to conform to. And, I wonder if looking back in the rearview mirror 50 years from now, those movements and some of the stuff that we see around gender stuff will end up just giving people permission to get in touch with their inner guidance and follow the flow of life as it occurs, as opposed to having this, that's kind of where I was getting to with the compliment of the way that you seem, that people can look at you and say, that's what I want. Well, that's a different type of resistance, and it's resistance
Hmm.
nonetheless.
Hmm.
Nonetheless.
It's, yeah, it is. It is. It's resistance to your own greatness and to your own life of flow and ease and happiness. Because um, I just think that's what's available, and it's available at a certain stage of evolution. And again, not better or worse. People, like you
Right.
said, some people think, oh, that's the better stage, but I just don't. If we can fully, okay, so if there's any way to move more quickly through the stages, and I don't think we actually can speed it up, but I think we can stop slowing it down. Uh, I think that the way to do that is to uh, fully inhabit whatever stage you're in. So like if it's the stage we're in, if I just really feel like hard work and making things happen and that really strong masculine drive is it just feels very natural to me. Well, then, lean into that, man. Go out and build shit and, whatever it is. And then at a certain point, if you really inhabit that, and of course, here's the trick, because, we talk a lot about ego and things like that here. Um, all of this, whatever stage you're in, becomes so much easier, like almost like mathematically. The less ego you have, the easier it is to be in whatever stage you're in. In other words, when you're identified, so like if I'm the doer and I'm super identified, like my ego is, I'm a doer, and look at, then you're going to have to stay in that stage until you become less identified with it. That's how I see it anyway. And then
Yeah.
at some point, you're less identified, and something else becomes available.
Yeah. And it's a big difference. And we don't lose those things, which is the cool thing of it. I have aspects of my personality that I look back now and think, man, I was so wrapped up in that facade that I was showing the world. And for a while, I was very good at it.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I kind of see, man, that's just that I was back then, I was a dog chasing my own tail and confusing activity with results. And for a time, I was lost in the weeds a little bit. However, now there's been a couple of moments where I realize that's a very useful skill set
Mm-hmm.
for me to have in this particular context. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh, I know how to do this.
Yeah,
And
that's
I had
good.
a situation, we've gotten a lot of snow here recently. And man, I was out plowing the snow for a couple of hours and a big storm was coming in and I knew I had to get it done and I was tired. But
Mm-hmm.
I was able to tap into my suck it up, power through, the obstacle is the way, and briefly summon, like, I guess some reserves, got into my reserve tank or whatever and had an enormous amount of activity, got it done. And at the end of it, just relaxed. And it felt good to relax in that
Mm-hmm.
moment. And it occurred to me then, you know, I used to do that first part all the time. I never did this part of sitting back and relax and just, noticing what's going on in my body and, some aches and some flush and all of that. And, we talk a lot about people being stuck in the fight or flight syndrome,
Mhm.
which it's bad to be stuck there. But when you need to be there,
Right.
it's actually it's a miracle of the design of the system that we just get this super acuity and sensory awareness and all
Yeah.
kinds of
It's very
cool
focused.
physiological. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Now, I'm fairly, I don't think you're saying that that was fight or flight that drove your last
No, no,
portion
no.
of it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah,
Two different things.
but it's an available state for us. And yes, when we need it, um, like all the philosophy in the world isn't going to save us if we're being chased by a tiger. So there's a, there's
Running needs to arise.
right, exactly. Um, but like, and I used to talk about this. There's a great book. What's the guy's name? He's pretty well known. He wrote a book called Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. Um, Probably 20 years ago now, but
Yeah,
and he writes about the stress response and how a zebra, you know, maybe it gets chased by a lion, and that fight or flight, it's basically the same mechanism in the zebra that it is in a human being, and it's going to run, and it's going to be all of its energy and focus is going to be on survival. But then if it escapes, see, at the end of that, one of two things are going to happen, right? Either the zebra is going to get eaten or it won't. Either way, that fight or flight response is going to end. Because if it gets eaten, that's that. But if it doesn't, it's back grazing in the pastures or whatever they
yeah.
have, with other zebras. And you don't see a zebra talking to its other zebras like, oh my God, the day the lion got me, almost got me. And it's on like, in zebra therapy, talking forever about the time and how traumatic it was. Zebras, I don't know what plural is. They don't seem to experience PTSD the way humans do. Because, and here's one, probably the main reason is because humans add meaning. I
Yeah.
mean, there's other reasons probably. I don't want to claim to be an expert in PTSD. Robert Sapolsky, Miriam is in the private chat, told him that's the author of the book,
Ah,
Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And also Marion has a suggestion for us. Um, but so I don't claim to be an expert in all things around PTSD, but I suspect one component is that we add meaning to an event. So the time the lion almost gets us, we make that mean something, and that tends to perpetuate a certain cycle. Now maybe we're getting a little off the topic here by getting into all this, but
yeah. Well, let's dive back into the topic, and I want to talk a little bit about how we can help maybe some things that people can invite into their life and be willing to receive
yeah.
that will make receiving a little bit easier. And I'll start with a tale of a coaching client who I was working with, and he was already wildly successful. I mean, he wasn't coming to enhance his peak performance capabilities, but like a lot of people, he noticed that the fact that he was very good at setting and achieving goals wasn't leading him to his ultimate goal, which was to be happy. He felt like he was constantly on a treadmill, and he found me somehow, and we started having conversations around slowing down and around breaking the conditioning and just creating a little space, not to in any way invalidate any of the techniques that he had been spent years mastering, but
Mm-hmm.
giving himself a little freedom that that was not necessarily the only way to live life. And he stated, I've used this on other podcasts, he gave me the analogy of, he goes, when I'm running late between connecting flights on a plane, I get this ultra focus, this hyper focus, where it's like I can navigate a pathway through the crowd like a chess player thinking many moves ahead, or like a punt
Mhm.
returner trying to evade everybody that's looking to tackle him. And he says the people that are wanting to sign me up for the credit card, they can just see me coming and they know no chance that they're going to be able to interrupt what I'm doing. And
I love
as
that.
he began to invite a little bit more presence in his life, he noticed a lot of happy little uh, coincidences happening in his life. He called them truffles. He's like, all of these little truffles just seem to be popping up on my
Mm.
path. And, we began to have a conversation around that, just wondering if it was something that he was now manifesting. That's kind of where he went to. And he said, but I have a feeling just from all of our conversations, you're going to suggest that they've been there all along, that's been my experience and is what I have experienced. I mean, any thoughts on that, and any techniques or suggestions that you have for people who are wanting to invite either more receiving or more presence or less resistance into their lives?
Well, yes. Um, I have this crazy idea that this game of life is set up for us to win. And I think it's set up for us to win in two areas, two very broad areas, uh, and I think the order in which we apply these two broad, the first game is foundational to the second game in my world. So the first game is the game of waking up. Uh, it's the game of realizing who we really are, of waking up to being or presence or however we describe it. And of course, that's an ongoing process. We all know it's not just, one time, or at least very rarely is it that. But at a certain point, we wake up enough that we recognize that peace and love and happiness and freedom more and more just becomes intrinsic. It's not something that we're continually seeking, which simply means that it's like the ego seeks. That's what it does.
Yeah.
Um, but really what this process is becoming less and less identified with ego. So at a certain point, we're, enough disidentified with ego that we're just, that seeking energy is just not so strong. Um, at that point, that becomes the foundation. In other words, when we know that our happiness is already taken care of, it's not based on some outcome that we create in the world, which is what the ego thinks, And of course, it never works, but it keeps trying, right? Oh, let's make $1 million. Like you're talking about your clients, right? Oh, that didn't make me happy. Maybe 2 million. Um, so at a certain point, we get off that merry-go-round because we just see that happiness is not dependent on that. And then the second game. So first of all, that game is set up for us to win, meaning that I have my way of doing it. Other people have their own, but I think that there are literally ways that we can. This pisses off the real spiritual seekers, but I think there are shortcuts. Sorry, it doesn't require, sitting in meditation for hours a day and endless purification rituals and all that stuff.
Or the
Um,
best one is multiple lives.
Multiple lives. You got to go through billions if you're a Buddhist, lifetimes. Look, I don't know. I always say this stuff is above my pay grade. I don't know what the rules of the universe are in some broad sense. My personal experience, personally and with working with clients, is that it doesn't have to be that hard. That we can wake up, gradually, but noticeably, more and more to something that I call the true self. And so that first game, and that's a whole other, conversation or podcast that we can do about what does that look like, at least to me. But then Beyond that, that's the first game. So the game is set up for us to win, to wake up. And then from that foundation, the second game is what I call creation. So, and this is all my clumsy attempt at answering your question, but in the game of creation, which is more where this idea of receiving seems to make more sense to me,
Hmm.
we can begin to see that we don't like that we can relax. And so, with that in mind, let me see if I can. That was all just maybe context to maybe try
I
and
like it.
give some version of an answer. So, with that in mind, um, I think that creation, receiving, which is really what you're asking about, is um, about just like this is where the game is set up for us to win, that we set some idea, like you decide what it is that you want. And the part of that game becomes, can I decide what I want from my head or from my heart? Like, is this truly something that lights me up, or is it just some egoic thing that, like, people will be impressed if I have a cool car or something? So
Or a means to an end, which is like to me the next level of that you think that cool car is going to get you the perfect relationship,
right.
which means you will finally be happy. We're
Yeah.
very good at creating those I forget the not a Ponzi scheme. There's a word for it. I can't remember it. Um, but yeah, we're very good at creating that. I'm
But
sorry.
it's a bit of a scam. You're not wrong.
Yeah.
That, like, somehow we'll accumulate enough that it'll make us happy. That's like the biggest scam on the planet. Um, so okay, yeah. So once we kind of get past that, that's why I'm saying the first game is, kind of waking up, and then from there, um, it's like we then begin to get more attuned to what do we really want, and so once we can play that game of what do I want, we begin to see that the desire for that and the really holding of that desire and the power of our imagination to imagine that has a lot of power, and it can literally help us to create what it is that we really want. And here's where I think, again, the game is set up for us to win, because when I think about something that I want, um, if it's bigger than just like I'd like an ice cream cone, um, there's usually going to be some degree of tension that shows up in me, which is whatever aspect of my current level of development, whatever it is, that thinks I can't have that. It's too much. I'm not good enough to have that. I'm not, because just because we've gotten to a certain point in our own awakening doesn't mean there's not, like, plenty more work to do. And what I'm saying is that is life literally saying, okay, you want this. Here's the stuff you have to sort out in yourself in order to get that. So it's giving you the curriculum. But we think, oh, that means something. This, we identify with that part of ourselves, and we think that means, oh, it means I can't have it. But I'm thinking maybe that we want to lean into that experience, lean into exactly what that feels like in such a way that we can, like, release the energy that's locked up, and in such a way that it actually becomes an opportunity to grow even further
Wow. Yeah, I
towards
like
what it
it.
is that we want. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total
Okay,
sense. I've
good.
I've got a good friend who is a wonderful manifester. He's moved from here down to Hawaii, and he now lives in a food forest, which
A food forest.
a food forest. He's got over 100 different foods growing on his property,
Hmm.
which is, and it is a forest. It's not a farm. It is completely wild and untamed. And I remember him sitting here. He's been down there for 3 or 4 years now, and saying that that's what he wanted to do. He said, "I think I'm going to move to Hawaii and see if I can just find some place that I can build a food forest, and in his mind he was building it, he was creating it, and he got down there and really not much was happening for 7 or 8 months. They were kind of looking around, looking at property and stuff, and then one day he just found the real estate agent called him up and said, I think, this place that I'm going to show you doesn't really have any good livable structures on it, but
Mm,
I think it has everything else that you're looking for, and it's a lot easier to build a house than it is to build a food forest. And
right.
he begins each day now. It's kind of like his the end of aggressively manifesting, getting all of his yang energy into
Right.
creation. Now he begins the day by asking the forest, "What do you need of me today?" And
Mm,
that's his morning meditation. And almost exactly as you describe it, it's the reason that it came to mind. It seems like his instruction, like his curriculum, his marching orders for the day that he's just downloading from source or wherever. And it is a little different. And it seems to me that first that part of it gets a lot easier once the
hmm.
first part has happened, not to necessarily create a path that you've got to follow. But it seems until you've invited into your life enough of a presence to really experience these happy coincidences, then it gets a lot. The other work, you've got the embodied knowledge that this can happen. And
Hmm.
in fact, that client that I mentioned earlier, the guy that ran through the airport
Hmm.
with the extreme focus, and he described these happy accidents as the truffles. He said, I'm wondering if I've just gotten my goals clear enough, and now the universe is aligning me to give me everything that I want, which is a common thing that people are out there selling on the internet. Learn my system of how to manifest anything
Hmm.
easily and effortlessly. And he said, or I wonder if I'm just finally vibrating at the right level to attract all of these things into my life. And he said it with a tonality that you could know that he hadn't really bought into either of those potential
Right.
explanations. And then he said, or I wonder if they've just been there all along, but I've had such blinders on that I wasn't able to notice. And, to him and his experience, that's exactly what, he kind of concluded was happening.
Kind of
And
amazing.
it's been our experience as well. I think that, as we've slowed down, different paths have opened up, and you can get so tied up into the identity of that creator being that
Hmm.
you start to treat that as who you are, where I think it's a much better way to look at it as a skill set that I've cultivated that is useful right up
Hmm.
until it's not, and then, may become useful again at
Well,
some
as you pointed
other.
out.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So I love I mean, like the description of your friend with the food forest. I'm like, wow, that to me strikes me as a whole new level of evolution.
Yeah.
Uh, and so, like we were saying before about, oh, I wish I was that guy. Well, I get it. You know,
Yeah, me too.
I,
I've been sitting here having a front row seat, and he and I talk about these matters all the time. He's very into the power of presence himself. He's not a coach or a mentor. He's just living his life in harmony with the moment. His relationship to the present moment
hmm.
is very uncluttered and probably not completely lacking resistance, but and open to receiving. But if not completely, he's only dialed it back one or two levels. That's for sure.
Yeah, and so that's what I'm saying. It's like, wow, there's always some next level that you can operate from,
Yeah,
and I think that's just amazing. Uh, so, wow, I mean, it's and I think that the best we can do is just be where we are in this game, and that will allow for something something to naturally emerge from that. Like there's always something next that can emerge.
absolutely. Yeah, so Miriam's just keeping track of us. Thank you, Miriam. We
Thank you, Miriam.
appreciate everything that you're doing, making this so easy. And Fred and I are going to be doing another broadcast a little bit later this week, highlighting a new program that he is going to be releasing. That's going to be on Wednesday at noon, and we'll probably broadcast it on the
Wednesday at
Presence
noon.
Posse
Uh,
Central.
Wednesday at noon Central. Correct. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Wednesday at noon Central. That's 9 o'clock Alaska time, 1 o'clock Eastern, and
Mhm.
you can do the math in other parts of the world. Do you want to share just a little bit of a teaser, not to have a total preview of the coming attractions, but just a little bit about what we're going to be
A
talking about
preview
on
of the coming
Wednesday?
attractions.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Coming attractions. More coming attractions. Um, uh, well, I think we've just done the coming attractions for it. Actually, I think that what I envision is it's going to be an ongoing group, probably meeting every other week, and we're going to talk about both of these phases as I described them: the phase of waking up and the phase of creation. And each meeting is going to include a little bit of both, uh, including group processes to kind of give people what I call glimpses of their true self, and other processes to kind of energize our creations, like what it is that we choose to create in this world. And um, and the most exciting part about this for me is the group energy that is available when 10 or 20 or 100 people all combine this, like their energy, that become I believe that we can literally ride that energy. That I believe it's exponential. As we all come together, we can ride that energy to our creation, like it becomes fuel for all of us.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's very much what I'm looking to create. It's so Bobby and I are going to talk about this on Wednesday, and I don't know, we'll find out what we talk about when we do, I guess.
Yeah,
But
as usual.
as usual, and then uh, plans to launch in the near future. Right now, I'm just kind of getting the word out, so I'll do some free intro preview kind of things, and then at some point we'll make it official. And it's going to be very low cost. That's the design of this group. It'll probably be somewhere in the vicinity of $20 or $25 a month to be a member, which I've been calling it the Netflix of self-realization, because it's designed to be very cheap and accessible to anyone, and hopefully offer a lot of value.
And there's no question that the group dynamic, I mean, you only need to think about hearing a great comedian and just thinking about the difference between watching a thing on Netflix versus
Mm-hmm.
being in the comedy club there live, where
Mm-hmm.
the
Yes,
whole energy's
exactly.
there. Same with a big movie or a
A
concert,
concert, right?
just, and in fact, we're here because of one of those groups. Every one of the
That's
Presence
right.
Posse was in Manny Wolf's great organic marketing group. And somehow, I mean, talk about open to receiving. Here, Manny is putting this group together that's about marketing, and half of the class that signed up for it were teachers of presence. And I'm not sure Manny knew what to do with us, but as he does, he adapted really, really quickly. And the Presence Posse is one of the things that came out of that. So
We lasted longer than the group did.
yeah, we did. How about that? And you just you never know just how far a
Exactly.
fresh insight is going to go. So
Just take
uh,
one step, just one more step
one
in the
step,
direction.
yeah.
You
And
know,
sometimes that's all the guidance that is available. But you take that step and you go, I see. I had to do this
exactly.
to get here.
Boy, I tell
So
you,
we're
to me, it looks like fun. I know we can make it mean anything. We can make it mean, oh my
yeah.
God, so much work or so hard. But right now, I think it's, Miriam says, don't start a new talk. I had the same thought.
Yeah,
Thank you, Miriam. We love you.
we
Okay. So
yeah, we'll cut this one off. You can join us next week where we'll be talking about the third subject in our winter series, presence and creating.
there you go.
And our first one was possibilities. That's in the group. You can watch that replay anytime that you want to.
And
Thank everybody for tuning. Go ahead.
I was going to say, tell us, please, where people can find our lovely podcasts and creations.
Well, yeah, you can find that one's not up yet on the podcast catcher. So that one currently you need to see it in the Presence Posse live group. We
Facebook group.
do release it on Facebook, yes, and we do release these as I get to them. I tend to batch them, and so they come in groups. And our previous Presence Posse podcasts, it's a mouthful. It's actually the Presence Posse Presents podcast, if you like alliteration. That is available at all of your places that you find podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Audible. We're on all of the major carriers
And
there.
there's quite a few already up there, right?
Oh yeah, we've got a pretty good library and more coming all
So
the
if you
time.
found this conversation interesting at all, um, there are more of them about all different presents and you name it uh, on all of those different channels that Bobby described. So go check them out.
Appreciate you guys joining in. We will see you next Wednesday for our special edition and next Monday for our regular show. Ciao
Awesome.
for now.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.